Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today.
Grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it. The title of our case today is An Unsuccessful Attempt to Escape to College. You'll understand that as we get deeper into this case. It is the case of Brittany Lorrits. On July 11, 2005, in the quiet, historically cultural arts town of Salisbury, North Carolina, an unusual call comes into the 911 emergency call center, stating that a girl appeared stabbed in the neck and wasn't breathing. This was highly unusual for the area because stabbings, let alone murder, were not crimes typically seen in the area. It was a small, quiet, and safe area. Despite this, EMS and police rush over to see if they can provide aid to this young woman. Once they arrive, they find a grisly scene. 18-year-old Brittany Lorrits is found laying face down on the floor beside her bed. She is deceased. There was nothing EMS could do to resuscitate her. Police take over the scene. They begin to process and take in what would now be their crime scene. It appeared as if Brittany wasn't moving when she was bleeding out. They find a ligature mark across her neck, and they see an unbound hanger, think wire hanger that someone takes apart, laying on the floor in her room. She appeared to be both strangled and stabbed, and this seemed like overkill to the police. Brittany was also fully dressed in her pajamas. She had on pajama bottoms and a top. It did not appear to be sexually motivated. And as the police continued to process the scene, they noticed that Brittany's bedroom was completely destroyed. And as they went through the house, they noticed that other rooms in the house were also ransacked. Maybe Brittany interrupted a burglar? The problem with this theory, though, was there wasn't anything taken. There was a computer untouched, jewelry and credit cards laid out in the open, no signs of forced entry, no broken windows or doors. The crime scene appeared to be staged. Police start their investigation by trying to understand who Brittany Lorrits was. Brittany was known by family and friends as quiet, peacemaker, a homebody, and a very kind and sweet young woman. Recently graduated from high school, and she was ready to spread her wings and fly. She got a summer job, and she was counting down the days until she started college, and she could not move out her family's home fast enough.
Brittany was born to Roderick Loritts and Tina Weeks. I want you guys to know that in several of the information that we were able to retrieve about this case, she was known as Tina and also Angela. We don't really know why, or, maybe that's her middle name, but for the purpose of this case, we're going to call her Tina. Just want you guys to know that there was a discrepancy there. While both of her parents helped raise her, they were not together. Tina married Reggie Weeks Jr., a well-known and prominent man in the Salisbury community. Reggie's family owned a construction business that had been in business for decades. The business had a great reputation and was known for employing people throughout the community. Reggie also had a good reputation and he was always at the church he attended, and he was a deacon in the church. Brittany lived with her mother and Reggie, but the co-parenting relationship between Roderick, Tina, and Reggie was a good one. They all wanted what was best for Brittany, and so they put any differences aside. Brittany also had a half-sister, Asti Loritts, and they were thick as thieves. They talked every night before bed, and they confided in each other about almost everything. Needing to rule out the family, detectives bring in Roderick, Reggie, and Tina to learn their whereabouts during the time of the murder. Tina explained that she went to work that morning and was at her job until about 4 p.m. She never left her job during that time. Roderick was out of town that day and was nowhere near Salisbury, North Carolina. Reggie also provided an alibi, and because of the nature of Reggie's work, his alibi was very detailed. Reggie was both the last person to see Brittany and the person that found her dead. He left the house around 7 a.m. He went to the job site on Bourbon Street and then went to another job to repair sheetrock and then stopped at a mechanic shop. After he left the mechanic shop, he went and picked up his dad because they were scheduled to have a consultation for a potential job with a woman named Amanda Scott. This is all very detailed. But after he picked up his father, he realized he didn't have any proposal paper. He stopped by his house to grab some on the way to Amanda Scott's home. When he got home, he walked in and saw the house in complete disarray. This surprised Reggie, so he called out to Brittany. When she didn't answer, he went to her room and found her laying in her bed. She was not moving or responding. Shaken up by the sight, Reggie ran to Brittany and picked her up, cradled her like a baby, and started screaming. Alarmed by the screaming coming from the house, Reggie's dad, who was still sitting in the car, rushed in the house and found his son completely distressed and his granddaughter deceased.
That is a very detailed story.
I mean, super detailed. I couldn't even tell you what I did this morning like that.
I absolutely can't tell you what I did this morning.
Come on, Reggie.
After Reggie walks through his day with the police, he continues to corroborate and answers any and all questions asked of him. He even volunteers taking a polygraph, providing his fingerprints, and offering his DNA. He told them that he would come back down to the station at another time to give them all this evidence. Because, he had been there for quite some time. After the tragic events of the day, it's just a lot, listen, let me just come down another time and get this done. The police let Reggie, Tina, and Roger go and continue to figure out who could have done this to Brittany. They talked to Brittany's sister, Asti, and she reveals that Brittany was in a relationship with a boy named Trey. And she was head over heels for Trey. She talked about Trey all the time. They bring Trey in and, try to learn a little bit more about the two's relationship. And he explains that they have been in a relationship for several months. He explains that although he talked to Brittany recently, he hadn't seen her for 2 weeks because she was out of town in Florida on a family vacation. The police are able to corroborate his alibi and they rule him out as a suspect. Back to square one, the police are trying to figure out who else could be involved. When Tina calls the police and recounts to them that 5 years earlier, when Brittany was 12 years old, she had an abortion. When the police push Tina on who could be the father of the child that Brittany aborted, Mom just completely breaks down. And she is just unable to clearly express who this could have been. She acts like she has no idea. The police question the dad, and the dad says the same thing. He's not sure who it was. He had no idea who this could have been. And so they go to Asti again. And Asti tells the police about an ex-boyfriend named Jerome. And when they look a little bit deeper into who Jerome was, they uncover that Jerome had a criminal background.
A little bit about Jerome and Terry. They were Brittany's first serious relationships. And the relationship that she had with Jerome was like your first love. It was puppy love, and she loved being around him and hanging around him. And actually, their relationship came to a very heated exchange that took place in their home. She was there with him, probably under some circumstances in which she shouldn't have been. And her parents caught her cuddling up with Jerome in the house. And they, of course, are like, you can't be with him. And Reggie, her stepfather in particular, was very adamant that she shouldn't be with Jerome because of this criminal background that MD just referenced. He felt like this guy was a thug. She had no business hanging out with him. And as a result, they kind of had a pushing match. And eventually Jerome was kicked out of the house. The police are looking at all of this information and they think that maybe this is their suspect. But they find out what, MD?
Well, the police were able to quickly rule Jerome out because when they brought Jerome in to interrogate him, Jerome was devastated by the loss of Brittany. The police recount that this emotion appeared extremely genuine and sincere. He was even willingly giving them fingerprints, DNA. He took a polygraph to which he passed. He answered all their questions. And when the police corroborated his alibi, well, they ruled him out as a suspect. The police were back at square one. I mean, Jerome seemed like the perfect suspect, but after they met him, They knew that it wasn't him, and they didn't have any leads on who it could possibly be.
The autopsy results finally came in and revealed that Brittany was strangled first and then knocked unconscious, but this did not kill Brittany. She was killed from being stabbed. Even though detectives initially ruled out any sexual assault, the medical examiner explained that there was an abrasion trauma to her genitals. However, he could not with any degree of certainty rule out that this abrasion was caused from consensual sex. And because there was no semen or DNA left on the body and there was no defensive wounds on her, police are back again at square one trying to figure out the pieces of the puzzle. Did Brittany have consensual sex with someone in the days or the day she was killed? Maybe this sex was the kind where partners choked each other, got a little frisky and kinky in the process, and maybe Brittany just simply passed out. And then presumably the guy freaked out thinking he killed Brittany, stabbed her, and staged her body and created the crime scene to make it look like it was a burglary gone wrong. The police didn't know, and leads seemed to be drying up. Realizing that Reggie never came back to the station provided his DNA, fingerprints, or taken a polygraph, the police head to Reggie's and Tina's house to find out if they could take him up on his offer. The detectives wanted to rule out each person, and this was the first step. But when they arrive at the Weeks' home, Reggie reveals that he retained an attorney and would no longer be willing to provide a polygraph, fingerprints, or DNA. So you don't want to cooperate no more, Reggie?
Right. And again, I say innocent or guilty, get an attorney. But in last week's case that we covered, we had a suspect that did a similar suspicious thing, right? But the problem with this is not that he got an attorney. That was good. Kudos to you, Reggie. You got an attorney. You recognize that I'm talking to the police. I can corroborate, but I will do so under the advisement of counsel. But the problem I have here, Steph, is the fact that when you do go get counsel, you should have your counsel or your counsel should be the ones to call the police and say, hey, just so you know, we now represent Reggie Weeks, and any and all communication now needs to come through us. No, the police have to show up at Reggie's house and find out, oh, now you got an attorney?
Oh, because you were so willing. So why didn't you have your attorney call us?
And do you really have an attorney, Reggie?
Let's find out. The police are shocked. The police were very suspicious of his actions. They moved the next way to rule out Reggie. They began to determine whether or not his alibi could be corroborated. That very detailed story.
I mean, very extensive alibi. So the police, they go on the hunt to verify if it was true. And once they begin to retrace Reggie's steps, the truth of his story start to break down. You see, police start combing through Reggie's story, and they find an obvious lie. Remember when Reggie told the police, Steph, that after he found Brittany, he cradled her in his arms like a baby?
Like a baby.
Like a baby. Well, this came back to bite Reggie in the butt because even though Reggie was unwilling to work with them anymore, there was several photographs and video footage of the family on the day that Brittany was found in her home killed. Pictures of the family that were standing outside of the house as EMS was carrying Brittany out of the home. And guess who was standing out there? Reggie. And guess who didn't have not a drop of blood?
It was
Reggie. And so the detectives know that it would be next to impossible for Reggie to have cradled Brittany like a baby and not gotten 1 ounce of blood on him. I mean, Steph, he literally had on his, construction uniform. He hadn't changed.
Right. So it obviously would have been on your person.
You would have had blood on you. On your hands,
yeah.
Even if it wasn't on your shirt. She was covered in blood. So this was their first major red flag. I mean, they had some little minor red flags along the way, but this one was like the United States flag. It was big in all its glory. They knew that they had to explore the possibility of his connection to this crime a little deeper. And what they uncovered would send shockwaves through this quiet community. Painstakingly went through every detail of Reggie's day of events. Like Steph said, it was completely and thoroughly detailed. He said he left the house around 7 a.m. And they found two neighbors that actually corroborated that they saw Reggie leave the house around 7 a.m. He got in his car, he drove off, but a few minutes later, they noticed Reggie turn his car back around and he came home. Reggie didn't tell the police that. Reggie did tell the police that he spoke to a neighbor around 7 a.m. when he left the house that day. And when the police went to go speak to said neighbor admitted, yep, I did speak to Reggie that morning. But it wasn't 7 a.m. It was around 11:15 even. That's about a 4-hour difference. Or 3.5. Reggie also told the police that he didn't come back to the house until closer to 4 p.m. with his father to pick up some proposal papers. However, a mail lady observed Reggie around lunchtime at the house, and she noted that his behavior seemed very odd. He was acting very upset and shaken, like he wasn't sure what he was doing.
You have to know that somebody's always watching something. I mean, besides the cameras that are always watching, somebody else is also watching.
Always watching. That's from Monsters, Inc., by the way.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't know. That potential client, Amanda Scott, that Reggie and his dad were slated to go meet that afternoon, well, that story began to unravel as well. Reggie told the cops that he called Amanda Scott several times that afternoon leading up to the day he was supposed to meet her. However, when the cops went to find Amanda Scott, they discovered that she did not exist. Now, you know what, Reggie? I'm about to go, y'all.
She didn't even exist, friends. Like, she literally was a fictitious character.
Reggie had no calls in his phone records of Amanda Scott. She was a fictitious character, as MD just recounted, in Reggie's growing world of lies. He made the name up to get his father to have someone with him when he went back to the house. And while all these lies pointed to Reggie as potentially having something to do with Brittany's death, they couldn't figure out what his motive was. And we always talk about motives here on Murder in the Black because naturally we just gotta know, why would you do this? Why would he kill his stepdaughter?
And motive is like extremely important to bringing a case, like for a prosecution to convict. Like, you gotta have your modus operandi. Like, why did this person do it? A jury just cannot, what Steph said, we gotta understand the human nature has to understand the why. Like, and the sad part about it is in some cases there isn't really one, right? Like, there's not always a motive. But for the cops, they knew that a lot of their evidence was circumstantial. And so it was essential to have a motive.
Detectives bring in Brittany's sister, and they began to ask about Brittany's relationship with Reggie. It was then that they learned that Brittany despised her stepfather. He was overbearing and wouldn't let Brittany do anything without him being present. Like, he would have her at church. I mean, she even described the relationship between her and Reggie as he would always keep her in church, and just as much as she was in school, she was at church. That's a little much. And it's excessive. He was very domineering. And Brittany's sister testified to this, but so did Brittany's best friend. He even refused letting Brittany visit with her sister and her father. He would come in and say, no, you can't visit with them. You can't go. Even after Tina said, you can go, gave her permission, he would come in and block that. Brittany would often joke with friends and her sister about finding food Reggie was allergic to so that she could put it in his food and kill him. Brittany even told a friend that her stepfather raped her. When her friend took it seriously and wanted to tell somebody, Brittany said, no, I'm just joking. It's just a joke. And with this last bit of information from Brittany's sister and friends, police believe that they have all the evidence they need to arrest Reggie Weeks Jr. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was damning nonetheless. And despite what you may have heard, you can get convicted on circumstantial evidence.
So the police arrest Reggie Weeks Jr. in August 2005. This is a little under a month from the day Brittany was killed. So I just want kudos to the Salisbury, North Carolina Police Department because they did their job. They did their job. The police believe that Reggie and Brittany got into a heated argument on July 11th. Reggie snapped in that argument and he began to strangle Brittany with a coat hanger. Brittany passed out. Believing that Brittany died, Reggie went and got a knife from the kitchen to ensure Brittany was dead. He stabbed her and then he staged her body to appear as if she was raped. He used an object to make it look like she was raped, and then he put her clothes back on. He ransacked her room and other rooms in the house to make it seem like it was a burglary gone wrong. With all the witness statements and circumstantial evidence that the detectives gathered, Reggie Weeks Jr. decided to take an Alford plea. An Alford plea is a guilty plea in which a defendant maintains their innocence but admits that the prosecution's evidence would likely result in a guilty verdict if they brought the case to trial.
So let me ask you this, MD. Is that an option for everyone, or is that like a special circumstance?
So, I mean, it's always an option, but like it's a deal. So a deal by its very nature means that both sides have to agree, right? So you could have, someone say, I want to take an Alford plea, and the prosecution say, absolutely not. And in cases where you have very strong evidence, meaning you have DNA, you have fingerprints, you have, the blood evidence, the whatever, you have forensic data, both computer forensic and, DNA forensic. Like when you have a lot of the actual evidence, you're going to have a prosecution that's they're not going to take an Alford plea. But also the defense is probably not even going to try to suggest taking an Alford plea. But when you have a case that is built highly on circumstantial evidence, such as this case, this is a circumstantial evidence case. Like Steph said, you can get convicted on circumstantial evidence. It's got to be a lot of it. It's got to be mounting. It's got to be overwhelming, right? But you can get convicted. When you have cases like this, that's where an Alford plea usually is going to come forth, because the prosecution, as confident as they are that you did it, they also understand that they only get one slice at the apple. So I take this to jury and this circumstantial case, and if a jury comes back and says not guilty, then I don't get to try this guy again. And I know that he's my killer. So I think that in this case, the defense attorney understood that and presented an Alford plea.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that up, because you don't hear it often in cases. And so, I was wondering, and I'm sure some of you may have been wondering, when is that used and how is it used?
And this Alford plea did result in Reggie getting second-degree murder. The prosecution actually did accept the Alford plea, and not just the prosecution, the court. The court accepted it. The judge has to accept it. I mean, and all plea arrangements, the prosecution and the defense can accept, but if the judge says no, it goes away. So all parties accepted, and Reggie received a 9-year sentence. Now, Tina, she stood by her husband through it all. She and Reggie maintained his innocence, but the rest of the family was devastated that Reggie received so little time. They also have no doubt that Reggie was the criminal that killed Brittany. Now, Reggie Weeks served his time. He was released from prison in March 2015, but he was arrested again in January 2016 for violating his parole. I was unable to find out what he did to violate his parole, but he did violate his parole, and he was back in jail where he served the remaining of his sentence. And I was unable to find out what has happened to him since. He's kind of fell off the map as of 2016. So our takeaways for this case. my takeaway for this case, Steph, is that you gotta create a safe space for people to share. And, here in this case, Brittany was sharing with her sister, Asti, and she was sharing with her best friend about how much she despised her stepfather. And, I am just glad that she felt safe to be able to share some of that, but she also didn't feel completely safe. And that's not Asti's fault or her best friend's fault. She just didn't feel like she could be completely honest, because she would oftentimes land on, I'm just joking. LOL. I'm not for real. I'm just playing. And so to our teenage listeners out there, I just want to share with you, when a friend shares information that seems off, the kind of information where your gut is telling you they're not joking, even though they say that they're joking. I feel completely uneasy about this. Even if you tell them, I'm not going to say anything, go share it with an adult. Go share it with an adult. And maybe it's not your mom or your dad, because maybe you don't feel like your mom or dad would take you serious, but maybe it's that mentor that's in your life, like the person that's maybe a few years older than you, but they're an adult, and just share it with somebody that can help you process whether or not this is information you should go share. Because it's better to be wrong than to be right and not have acted. While it's not anyone's fault that Brittany is dead, but Reggie, okay, let's be very clear. I often wonder, Steph, in cases like this, if as bystanders in the victim's story, if we could have done more. And I just wonder if maybe somebody had taken her serious in her joke, in her quote unquote joke, if this would have been a case where she ended up dead, because she was counting down the days to get out that house. She knew, I just got to make it through this summer, and then I'm going to be in college, and I'm going to be out this man's house. And unfortunately, she never made it.
Also, as parents, I think you need to believe your children. And I think there were some various obvious signs. But when she got pregnant at 12 years old, and her mom or biological father, for whatever the reasons were, did not push to know who impregnated her, you have to just really scratch your head. And then to that point, to know that her mother still chose this man in the end, it's a little bit too much for me. But if you know of anybody who is experiencing any type of abuse or sexual assault, I encourage you to call the RAIN hotline. The number is 1-800-656-4673. We will have that information in our show notes, as well as you can go to www.rain.org. There is help available for everyone and anyone who may need resources and how to tell someone, or just to call and get the resource readily available for you. I want to go ahead and do a giveaway. I'm putting MD right on the spot, like boom. Yeah.
Okay.
But we love y'all, and y'all have supported us for 3 years, almost 4. And we just want to show y'all some love during this Christmas season. So, in lieu of that, if you just drop a review for us, we will pick about 6, maybe I can nudge MD into doing 10 winners.
Okay, 10.
10. We gonna say 10.
10 winners. That means you got a really good chance of winning here.
Just, go ahead, leave us a 5-star review. Let us know how much you love the show, and your name will automatically be entered into a giveaway. It's been a while since we've done a giveaway anyway.
Absolutely. And you guys are deserving of it. And it's the holiday season.
Hey. So we got to give back, give you a little something to put on your baby's gift. You know what I mean? Right. So we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week. Until then, this is Murder in the Black.